When my mother died, I had to empty her apartment. And so I found a pretty alligator purse, and I opened it up, and there were about 60 to 70 letters in German that she was saving, that she would get from Europe when we were here in the United States and the family was still in Europe. I was so lucky to have them because when I read them, first of all, I learned so much about what had gone on, and I learned about all the different branches of the family who were still in Germany, most of them. My father, during the First World War, he was too young to be drafted. So at 16, he began to apprentice for this bank called the Neustädter Bank. When he was 30 years old, he was head of the foreign exchange division of that bank, and they loved him. In 1934, they had the Nuremberg laws, which was to keep the Jews separate from anywhere where they could get in touch with non-Jews. When there was no more future for my father there, after the whole bank business, we decided we had family already in the United States, which is, I guess, the way we got a visa. It was not easy anymore, but my father loved Germany. He never would have come if he hadn't been forced to. A lot of German Jews felt like that. They were very loyal to Germany, but when these things began to happen, they realized some of them realized they had to leave. My Uncle Heiner was my favorite person in the whole world, always. He was closer to me than my father. Now, this was a young man. He was my mother's kid brother, 2 years younger than my mother, and he was really my male figure that I loved dearly. He was a wonderful person. He was an idealistic person, and he was a very intelligent person, as I saw from the letters that he wrote that were beautifully written. He was completely interested in Zionism, and he loved the idea of Israel. He knew a lot about the history of the Jewish people, where they had been thrown out of every country they ever went into, and he felt that the only way that Jews could be safe is to have their own country with their own army. And there were various different camps that were set up to train these young Jews on how to be farmers, how to be plumbers, how to develop the skills that they would need in Israel once they got Israel. And so he went to 2 of the camps in Germany, and it got to the point where they wouldn't allow them to do it anymore. So now he's writing from, I think there were 2 camps in Belgium that he was in, and he loved these people that he was working with, you know, the comrades. He called them the comrades. So when things began to look bad, he could have come to the United States, but he wouldn't hear of it. He only wanted to go to Palestine. In 1940, the Germans occupied Belgium. Heiner didn't go out of the camp willingly. They were invaded by the Germans, and they didn't know what to do with these Germans in the camp. They ended up in the very, very south of France, and in a place called Perpignan, where they had a concentration camp, and that's where the Jews ended up, because Hitler was not at the point where he was killing them yet, but he wanted them out of Germany. The camp in Perpignan was so bad that a third of the inmates, this is what he writes in his letters, petitioned the German authorities in Bordeaux. They wanted to be under German rule, not France. After a while, he was sent to another concentration camp called Gurs. And at that point, the Germans had deported the Jews from the western part of Germany to these camps in south of the Pyrenees. They were deported, they were taken out of their homes in October 22nd, 1940. And by that date, you can imagine in the Pyrenees it was getting colder and colder. So the older people, which would have been my other two grandparents, this grandmother, and other family members who were older, they died within the first year because of the weather. A lot of the letters that I have were those letters where they were writing from the concentration camp. My grandmother, who was very caring always and who wrote before the war all the time, she even sent care packages from Germany to some of her family here, who she felt needed stuff. But she didn't. Once she entered the Gurs, she stopped writing, and we kind of thought for a while that it was maybe because of her mood, her depression, but that's not what it was. What it was is they were given a half hour when they were deported to get all their things, to pack their things. What did they know about packing for this kind of an emergency, and what kind of conditions there would be at the camp when they didn't even know they were going to a camp. When in all the fuss, she didn't take her glasses, and she couldn't see without them, and there was no place to get another pair of glasses. So she stopped writing from that point on. We heard from her husband, my grandfather, but never again from her. If you wanted to come to the United States, you had to go to the consulate in Marseille. And you could only do that at a certain point if your number came up. Now, my grandfather had a terrible dilemma, a couple of dilemmas, some that were caused by the State Department in this country, where while these people were in a concentration camp in France, they imposed another restriction on their being able to come. They had to now, besides all the other visas that they had to have a statement of good citizenship from the police department in Germany. But the number came up, and now the dilemma my grandfather had is he'd have to go to Marseille, and it was like another little concentration camp there, and they had no room for women. The women's part was filled up. And so if he went, there was nobody to take care of my grandmother. And she was very, very fragile at this point. And he tried to make arrangements so that the few food packages that came, he would be able to get to her, and he did his best. But his best many times weren't good enough. He stayed with her for a while, and then he realized that wasn't going to get anything done. It wasn't going to get the papers done. It would delay everybody coming. So he finally went, and his worst fears were drawn out because while he was gone, she died. And then a few weeks later, he had a heart attack and he died. So neither of them could come here. In 1942, the middle of 1942, everything had changed. The Germans had become more involved in the running of France, of the zone. The zone got a lot less free. Now, the people, and also the philosophy of what Hitler wanted. You know, he had the conference where they invited all the countries to take a few of the refugees, and they didn't. And he said, I can get away with anything. Nobody's interested in taking the Jews. And his policy, again, which was before that, just to make Germany Judenrein, which means free of Jews. That was enough for him. It changed to the final solution, killing them. And so the policies changed in France, and anybody who had survived, and those were the younger people, till the middle of 1942, now were going to be deported. So they first were taken north to Drancy, a holding area, and from there they were transported now to the killing camps in the east, in Austria. My Uncle Heine was transported, he to Auschwitz at that point, and the next letter that my mother sent him was returned, address unknown.